Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the One World Mathematical Physics seminar of the International Association of Mathematical Physics. We are happy to have today David Gontier from École Nationale de Pont-en-Chaussée, who will speak about Keller estimates of the eigenvalues in the gap of Dirac operators. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation to talk in this online seminar, and thank you all of you for being here. I know it's a bit difficult to follow online seminars, so I'll try to be entertaining, so you won't sleep. So this is a joint work with Jean Dolbeau in Dauphine, Fabio Pizzicillo, I think it's in Spain now, and Han van den Bosch from Chile. And it's about Keller estimates for the eigenvalue. So it's about eigenvalue optimization. And let me start with the well-known problem of the optimal shape of a drum. So you all know the question asked by Lord Rayleigh: which drum shape produces the lowest note? And you all know the answer. It's written at the bottom of the slide, but I want to first convince you that this is not the good question. The question is not, you have some piece of leather and you want to produce the lowest note. Usually you want to produce a note and you want to use the minimal amount of leather. So mathematically, this problem, you know it. You minimize the first eigenvalue of the Dirichlet Laplacian, and you have to optimize it on omega, a set with a given area. But as I said, this formulation is not correct. A better formulation is the following. I want to produce a note lambda. What is the minimal amount of leather needed to make the corresponding drum? So now you talk about money. You want to optimize your money. So you want the infimum area, the infimum amount A of leather, so that there exists a shape with this area and which produces this note. So my talk will be to convince you that this formulation is much better than this one. And this one, you cannot translate it in the Dirac world, but this one you can. And of course, you know that the optimal shape will be the disk. So this is the Rayleigh problem. I'm looking at the Keller problem, which is the same problem, but now I don't want to optimize the shape. I want to optimize a potential V. So the question is, I want to produce the lowest note of a Schrödinger operator minus Laplacian minus V. I optimize among all potential V that will be positive, and which I fix the LP norm of V. So that will be the area of V, if you wish. It's an LP version of the Rayleigh problem. So this question was asked by Keller in 1961, and you optimize only the first eigenvalue of this operator. So first remark, because you want the first eigenvalue, you can use the min-max principle and write this problem at the infimum over all eigenfunctions u, all functions u, minimum over all potential v of, and now you have the quadratic form, gradient u square minus v u square. And this will be negative. So just a simple fact, by scaling, you scale this way, u and v, you will discover that lambda of alpha actually is lambda of 1 times alpha. So you only need to compute one quantity, this lambda of 1. And the power here, you want that it stays finite as alpha goes to 0. So it gives you some information about the p. LP cannot be anything. It must be bigger than 1 and bigger than d over 2. Otherwise, you have a problem. And Keller answers this question. It proves that there exists an optimal V. So you can write this inequality with this scaling of this form. The first eigenvalue of a Schrödinger operator to the power gamma is bounded by a universal constant independent of V times some LP norm of V. So this is true for all gamma. So gamma is just a change of variable. I said gamma is P minus D over 2. So because I have a constraint on P, gamma must be bigger than 1 minus D over 2 and 0. So after dimension 3, 1 minus 3 half is less than 0. So it's for all gamma positive. In particular, if you take gamma equals 0, you're, nope, you can prove that no, it doesn't work, it's after. And this constant is the best constant for this inequality. So you bound an eigenfunction with the LP norm of V. There is a well-known extension by Lee and Tiering in 1975, where you can have the sum of all eigenvalues of these Schrödinger operators. So instead of doing the first eigenvalue, you can bound the sum of all eigenvalues by a universal constant independent of V times the LP norm of V. And this time, if you take gamma equals 0, you bound the number of eigenvalues by some LP norm of V. All right, so this is a problem. I want to make a few connections with other problems well known in mathematics. If I write it this way, it's the inf problem, which is good because I can optimize in U first, or I can optimize in V first. So let's assume that I have an optimizer. What I can do is fix V and optimize in U first. And I know that the optimal U is optimal also when I fix V. If I do that, I will discover that the optimal U must be an eigenfunction of the Schrödinger operator. So it's of minus Laplacian U minus VU equal lambda U. It's the first eigenvalue of this operator. I can do the opposite game. I fix U and optimize in V. You see the problem is linear in V, but I have an LP constraint on V. So I fix the integral of V to the power P. So if I write the Euler-Lagrange equations for the optimization in V, this time I will discover that V must be some power of U. It's very easy to do. V to the P minus 1 must be some power of U square, which is a gradient of V here. Now, if I combine this property and this property, you'll see that U satisfies actually a non-linear Schrödinger equation of this form, minus Laplacian U, minus V, but V is some power of U, times U equal lambda U. So if you rescale V, you have the well-known non-linear Schrödinger equation like this with some power Q, which is some combination of the P power. This is for the existence, and Kaufman proves that there is uniqueness of the NLS equation, a positive NLS equation, uniqueness of a positive solution of the NLS equation, and this proves that this problem has also a unique minimizer back to translations. So this gives a link between the Kähler problem and the NLS equation. Now I want to do a link with another well-known inequality, the Gagliardo-Nirenberg inequality. So this time we prove this. So now instead of fixing the norm of U, I remove this constraint. So I multiply everything by the norm of U square. So I have this inequality for all U and for all V with mass 1. Now I just put the V on the one side and the lambda on the other side. I use the fact that lambda is negative. So it's equal minus this absolute value. And now I optimize this quantity as a function of V in LP. But this by definition of the LP norm is the fact that LP prime is a dual of LP. This is just the LP prime norm of U square, this term. And so you discover that the LP prime norm of U square is controlled by the gradient of U and the L2 norm of U. And now if you optimize over scaling, you will discover this inequality that some LQ norm of U is controlled by a combination of the gradient of U and the L2 norm of U with some theta and an optimal constant K. Okay. So this is the Gagliardo-Nirenberg inequality. And so just with simple mathematical facts, you see there is a strong connection between eigenvalue optimization, functional inequalities, and nonlinear PDEs. It was a nonlinear Schrödinger equation. And last thing I want to mention in this brief introduction is that in dimension 1, we have explicit solution. We know the optimal V as this form. It's 1 over Cauchy square, so it looks like a soliton. It's exponentially decaying, for example. Okay, so my goal of this talk is to extend all these results to the Dirac operator. So let me introduce the Dirac operator first. It has this form. So this is my notation for Dirac with a mass m. So it's you take the derivative, the impulsion in the xj direction, but you multiply it by alpha j, which is a matrix. So Dirac operator is a matrix value operator, and it has a derivative in the coefficients of the matrix. So you have this alpha times partial derivative plus n times beta, and beta is also a matrix. So c is the speed of light, but in my talk I will take c equal 1 very soon. So alpha j and beta are Hermitian matrix in some of size n, big N, and big N is linked to the dimension of the space. So it has this formula. And they satisfy some commutation rule. So they anti-commute if j is different from k. Then alpha square is equal to identity, beta square is equal to identity, and beta anti-commutes also with the alphas. So let me give you an example. In 2 dimensions, the Dirac operator, there is a basis in which the Dirac operator has this form, n, and here you have a first derivative in x and y in this coefficient, then with the complex conjugate, Hermitian conjugate here, and minus n. So if you don't know what is the Dirac operator, it's not important. The only 2 facts which are really important is that if you square this operator, you recover minus Laplacian plus m squared times identity. So in some sense, the Dirac is a good square root of the Laplacian. And the spectrum is minus infinity minus m, and then m plus infinity. And in particular, it is not bounded from below. And this will be the main trick in my talk. So I'm interested in the eigenvalues of the Dirac operator. So I will add a potential V. V will be in LP as the original Kähler problem. V will be positive. We will prove soon that if I take a positive V, we will see eigenvalues emerging from the upper essential spectrum. So they will accumulate at plus m, and then they will go to the negative side. And I want to optimize the first eigenvalue. But here you have a problem. The lowest eigenvalue is not a well-defined quantity. For example, I cannot use the min-max principle to characterize this first eigenvalue because the operator is unbounded from below. So what I really want is the first eigenvalue in the gap, but first I need to define what is the first eigenvalue in the gap. I need to prove that, for example, I do not have an accumulation of eigenvalues at minus n. So let's assume I can define a lambda 1 d. So this will be the first eigenvalue in the gap of this operator, so these eigenvalues has been studied in many different contexts, and a well-known one is when you study this operator where v is 1 over x. So this function 1 over x is not in LP, but I can still study this operator. This is the Coulomb-Dirac operator. There is a constant kappa, and this is the plot of lambda 1 of d of kappa, the function of kappa. So as expected, we will prove this fact. It will emerge, so when kappa equals 0, you just have the free Dirac operator. So and when you increase kappa, you have a branch of eigenvalue emerging from the upper essential spectrum until you hit kappa equal 1, and you have a big problem for this operator because at kappa equal 1, this operator is no longer self-adjoint. So actually, the spectrum breaks completely, and you can have a spectrum everywhere. So it's not so easy to study these operators because this function is not in LP. In my talk, I will talk about LP V potential, and this makes the things better, and we will see branches going to the negative essential spectrum. Here are some references for the study of this operator. So here is the main theorem. So this is theorem 1. So I will assume that P is bigger than D, bigger than 1. So this will be the condition from the Dirac case. There will be a critical alpha star. Alpha star will be the critical mass of V, such as the following holds. So for all potential positive with LP norm less than this critical mass, the lowest eigenvalue is well defined. So I can give a mathematical definition to this guy. There is no accumulation to the bottom essential spectrum. This optimal lambda, so if I optimize this eigenvalue for all V with a given norm alpha, and alpha less than alpha star, it is well defined. It's a decreasing function from 0 alpha star to plus m minus n. So let me give you a picture. This will be parameterized by alpha. So this is my alpha axis. Here will be the spectrum of my operators. So you have to think m equal 1 in your head. So there will be essential spectrum above here, essential spectrum below, and I'm plotting here the first eigen lambda of alpha for different value of p. So for example, you look at the blue line, p equal 1.1, you have a first eigenvalue emerging from the upper essential spectrum. You increase alpha, it goes down, goes down, goes down, and at some critical alpha star, it touches the bottom essential spectrum. And after this point, I can no longer define what is the first eigenvalue in the gap. But before, I know there will be no spectrum in this area. So this is for p equal 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and so on. And now if I look at this alpha star of p, so now this axis is p, and I look at this critical mass, and you'll find this weird shape here. So it's a non-trivial function, and actually we have a conjecture. What is this function in 2 slides? No questions? Okay. Second theorem, so that was for the existence of an optimal potential V. And the theorem, the theorem 1 is that the first eigenvalue is well defined. Theorem 2 is the existence of optimizer, so there exists an optimal potential for this problem. And it satisfies a nonlinear Dirac equation. So there is optimal potential, optimal eigenspinor psi, so psi is a vector, no, of size n. V is some power of psi as in the Schrödinger case. And psi will solve the nonlinear Dirac equation. So Dirac psi minus some power of psi equal eigenvalue times psi. So again, you have a strong link between eigenvalue optimization and the nonlinear Dirac equation. Theorem 3, in dimension 1, we have explicit computations. So if alpha is less than this critical case, V of x will have some one-over-Koch structure, so looks like a soliton. And when alpha equal alpha star, the critical case, V of x is a Aubin-Talenti function, 1 plus x squared. So you have a nice transition between a soliton-like potential and a Aubin-Talenti potential. And this is the conjecture we have with the formula I mentioned. So we think that at alpha equal alpha star, so alpha star is the point where this eigenvalue branch touches the bottom essential spectrum. So when you touches the bottom essential spectrum, there is only one potential allowing this, and this is the Aubin-Talenti function. This is a conjecture. It's true in dimension 1. We don't know if it's true in dimension higher, but actually this potential and the corresponding eigenspinor satisfies the nonlinear Dirac equation. So at least this is a solution to this equation. So I can find a psi such that it solves this. And if this is true, you know what is alpha star. It's just the LP norm of this guy, V. And this gives you this crazy formula, which is here. So a slight remark, psi square is, so V is a power of psi, so psi is also a power of V. So if you optimize in V, you'll discover this formula, but V is 1 over x squared. So psi of x will decay like x to the minus 2p minus 1. In particular, this will be an L2 function if p is large enough. So this is a situation where you can prove that in the Dirac operator with this potential, lambda equal minus m is an eigenvalue embedded in the essential spectrum. So minus m is also is part of the essential spectrum, the end of the essential spectrum, but also an eigenvalue, and this will be the corresponding eigenvector. I mentioned that we can write a Gagliardo-Nirenberg inequality for Dirac, but it's not nice. The main difference with the Schrödinger case is that there is no scaling. If you try to rescale the problem, as I did in Schrödinger, the mass is also hitting the scaling. So if I fix the mass, I fix some kind of scaling, and it's not nice to write the Gagliardo-Nirenberg. But we can do it. We can control some LQ norm with the Dirac operator. This is optimization of the first eigenvalue, but we can also do a Lipti ring type inequality in the Dirac case. I will not mention this today. So let me give you the idea of the proof. and it uses the Birmanch finger tools. So I think it's entertaining, and I hope you think like me. So I will use many tricks. I will make several changes of variable until I have a nice and entertaining optimization problem, and easy enough so that I can solve it. And the first trick is the one I mentioned at the very beginning, is that you need to reformulate the problem. What we want is we fix a node lambda, and we want to optimize the laser, the amount of laser. So I'm looking at the dual problem, A of lambda, the minimal amount of mass, such that there exists a potential with this mass, and so that lambda is in the spectrum of this operator. Exactly the dual version of the Schrödinger case, but now in the Dirac case. You fix a node, and you want to minimize the LP norm of the potential. So you can convince yourself that the map I was mentioning, lambda of alpha, is the inverse map of A of lambda. So if I study this map, I have all the information I need for the lambda of alpha, which I mentioned in the theory. But now lambda is fixed, so now I can use Birmanch finger. The principle states that lambda is in the spectrum of this operator if and only if one is in the spectrum of this modified operator, which I will mention develop soon. And the proof is very easy. In case you don't know it, you write the eigenvalue equation, you put lambda on one side, V on the other side. Then, because lambda is in the resolvent set of the Dirac, you can multiply by the inverse of this map. You take this equation, and now you multiply this equation by square root V. You use the fact here that V is positive valued. I mentioned several times, but now it comes into play. You change variable, you call phi equals square root V psi, and this equation is equivalent to this one. You have to check that phi is also an L2 functions, but this is the Birmanch finger principle. This operator here is called the Birmanch finger operator, has very nice property. So first, I can reformulate this problem as follows. I look at the infimum of alpha such that there is V with this norm and such that 1 belongs to the spectrum of this operator. I just modified lambda by this guy. That was step 2. Let me mention Birmanch finger operator. So I call this operator KV of lambda. You see it has a nice structure. It is symmetric. You can prove it's self-adjoint. And actually, you can also prove it's a compact operator, and this comes from the Kato-Simon-Seiler inequality, because this operator is a multiplication in Dirac space, and the Dirac operator is a multiplication in Fourier space, with some functions which have nice LP properties. So KV, you can prove that it is compact. And last fact is that the map lambda to this operator is operator increasing. The proof is easy. You differentiate with respect to lambda, but this is a differentiation of a resolvent. So it's the resolvent square. So the differentiation is a positive operator. And so this operator is increasing as a function of lambda. In particular, all eigenvalues are increasing as a function of lambda. So let me give you 2 pictures. This is the Schrödinger case. Maybe you're more familiar with the Schrödinger. So Schrödinger, you replace the Dirac by minus Laplacian. In the Schrödinger case, you can compute the same. The x-axis is lambda. In Schrödinger, you stop at, it is well defined for all lambda negative, and then you have the essential spectrum 0 plus infinity. For all value of lambda, you have a compact operator. I can compute the spectrum easily. It's compact, so it decreases to 0. I only plot the 10 first highest eigenvalue. And all branches are increasing, and as soon as you touch 1, lambda is in the spectrum of the Schrödinger operator. So here I think I took a Gaussian function for V, and you see it has 2 negative eigenvalues for lambda equals this guy and lambda equals this guy. And the Dirac case is the same, but in Dirac case, this operator is no longer positive. So you have negative and positive eigenvalues. But apart from that, it's the same picture. You have increasing branches, and as soon as you touch 1, you have eigenvalue. And here you see that this is the eigenvalue we are interested in. This will be the lowest eigenvalue in the gap. And you also see that if I take V positive, now you see why the eigenvalues must emerge from the upper essential spectrum and not the lower essential spectrum. So imagine you replace V by kappa V. In kappa equals 0, K is equal to 0. So you have only the eigenvalues at 0. And when you increase V, some branches starts to move up in the increasing way. And so you find eigenvalues first appearing on this edge instead of this edge. And that's why when you choose V positive, you select one side of the Dirac operator. Good, so step 3. So this is what the formulation we have now. And step 3 is remark that if you replace V by lambda SV, S pops out. So what I can do is define W, which is a renormalization of V. So the LP norm of W is 1. And just with some manipulation, you see that 1 is in the spectrum of this operator, if and only if 1 over the mass of the LP norm of V is in the spectrum of this operator. But now W has fixed mass 1. And recall that this, we want to optimize this guy. You want to minimize this, or in some sense, you want to maximize 1 over the mass. So let me denote by mu1 of W the largest positive eigenvalue of this operator. I take supremum everywhere, and I will get that 1 over A, so this optimal mass, is the supremum of the all W with mass 1 of the Biermann-Stinger operator. And now I'm very happy because I have a sup problem. I have the supremum as a function of the potential. And now I'm looking at the largest eigenvalue of the Biermann-Stinger operator. So I have a supremum also in the min-max formulation for the eigenvalue. And that's the box equation here. So 1 over A is a sup in W, sup in phi of this operator. So I have a sup problem. I'm very happy. I can do a lot of manipulation. But before that, I have step 5. So if I go slightly back, you see that I have W and phi. I want to optimize in both W and phi, but actually there is only one function which is involved, which is square root W times phi. And here, if I put square root W on the other side, there is only one function involved. So let me change variable and call this square root W times phi small w. This is bounded in LP. This is bounded in L2. So W is bounded in some LQ space. This is Hölder inequality. So I know that some LQ norm of W is less than 1, and Q given by this formula. And with equality, if and only if W to the 2p is pointwise equal to phi to the square. And this equality, if I go back to the original variable, so if I rewind everything, recall that phi is square root of the usual psi and so on in the Biermann-Stinger. This is exactly the condition that V must be power of psi. So in some sense, the Euler-Lagrange equation that V is the power of psi is just a consequence in this formulation of the Hölder inequality equality case. So this, I recover one of the Euler-Lagrange equation, and now I have this formulation. So I should write W here. Here is W. Okay. I want the supremum of phi resolvent phi. Phi is in LQ, and it is normalized in LQ. And this is the final problem I want to study. I optimize over one function. Here I have only the resolvents, and I have a constraint LQ norm of the of phi, and Q is some number between 1 and 2. So a few remarks. Here I did all the 5 steps with Dirac operator, but there is nothing special about Dirac operator. I can do the exact same argument with the Laplacian, but also with the fractional Laplacian, Bilaplacian. I can do some periodic mean field Hamiltonians and take lambda in the gap and do exactly the same computation. I just, instead of having the resolvent of Dirac, I will have the resultant of a mean field Hamiltonian. So it's a powerful tool to study mean field Hamiltonian phi equal phi to the power. That's the first remark. Second remark, this is, so in the case of Dirac or Schrödinger or Laplacian and so on, this is a convolution operator because it's a multiplication in Fourier space. So let me, the kernel k lambda of x and y depends only on the difference x minus y. So I can also write this J problem as a convolution form, the supremum of W, k lambda convolution W. And now you can give this as an exercise for your students. You don't mention Dirac at all. You say, oh, this is a K, some kernel. Please prove that this problem has an optimizer. You can also write it in Fourier space. So this formulation becomes just the integral of the Fourier transform of K times W square. There is a Fourier missing here. It's just that you have the LQ norm of W as a constraint, and this does not translate well in the Fourier space. It proves in particular that Q cannot be equal to 2, so you have to take Q less than 2, because otherwise the Fourier of L2 would be L2. It would be an optimization of all L2, and then you can see if you optimize this for all L2 functions, and W wants actually to be a Dirac mass in the minimum of K. So there was an argument to prove that Q must be in this interval in some sense. So with all this manipulation, I can finally state the true theorem that we proved in the article. For all Q between 1 and 2, introduce Q prime the dual power, R Q prime over 2. And I assume that the kernel K satisfies that K of X equal K of X, there is a minus X, I think, star. So this is to prove that this operator is self-adjoint. I assume that this kernel is in LR space. It is matrix value if I wish, as in the Dirac case. Then this map W maps to W, K convolution W is well defined, real valued. And if this problem is strictly positive, then this problem has an optimizer. And the proof is the usual concentration compactness method of Lyons. So you take an optimizing sequence with mass Q equal 1. First, you translate the sequence because the problem is completely translational invariant. So you translate the sequence so that the mass stays around x equals 0. You extract a weakly converging sequence to W star. And the tricky part is to prove that you didn't lose mass in this procedure. So you have some kind of compactness in this whole procedure. So I will not develop the full theory because it's usual concentration compactness. I'm just pointing that you don't have to worry about regularity here. The main results by Lyons is convergence in H1. Here it's convergence in LQ, and the derivative of W is never mentioned. So in some sense, more easy. So if you admit that this works, this proves the results. It gives an alternative proof in the Schrödinger case. So in particular, we proved Gagliardo-Nirenberg. We recover Gagliardo-Nirenberg with a proof, a slightly different proof. So, good. That's the main result. I want to show you some conjectures that we have and some current and future works that we are doing. So first conjecture, so I want to show you the main difference between the Schrödinger case and the Dirac case. So in the Schrödinger case, the kernel of the resolvent has a very nice property. It is a positive radial decreasing function. You can compute it explicitly. In particular, if you look at this supremum problem, you can do a rearrangement. You can rearrange W and K, but K equal K star because it is positive radial decreasing. Recall that we want to optimize this quantity. So if you take any W, you see that W star is always a better candidate for this optimization problem. So in particular, in the Schrödinger case, the optimal V must be radial. This is in some sense the Faber-Tran property. So, but in the Dirac case, this argument no longer works. Actually, K is a matrix, so I don't know what it means to be positive radial decreasing for a matrix. It's not clear to me, so I don't know what is the correct argument here for Dirac, but I can do numerics. So here is a numerical simulation. I start with V, which is completely random, and I do this algorithm. I take phi, the first eigenvector of the Biermann-Schwinger operator, and I update V because I know that V must be phi to some power. And I continue this algorithm. I iterate for 10 times. And what you see, first you optimize the problem. So it's a good algorithm to optimize the problem. And you start from random. And after 10 iteration, this is the level lines of V. You see a nice radial function V. We have no idea why, but it works. You start from completely random, you check that you improve your inequality, and then you have a radial function. We know it's true for dimension 1 because we have explicit computation, but that's it. So a good problem. Question 2, is this first eigenvalue concave? Let me remind you that in the Schrödinger case, lambda 1 is a concave function of V because it's the infimum of such problem. And so you have a min-max principle. But if you write this, you have the infimum in U of linear functions of V. Because for all fixed U, this is linear in V. And if you take the infimum of linear function, you obtain a concave function. So lambda 1 is concave in the Schrödinger case. But again, in the Dirac case, lambda 1 is not defined by the infimum of something. And so I don't know about the concavity of lambda 1. This would have impacts on the stability of molecules in the Dirac case. But we don't know how to do it. We can check numerically that it works again. Third question, we don't know if the eigenvalue is simple. So the first Dirac eigenvalue, but also for the highest eigenvalue of the Biermann-Schwinger operator. We don't know how to prove this. Again, in the Schrödinger case, it comes from the fact that the Biermann-Schwinger operator has positive kernel. And so you can apply Krein-Rüthmann theorem, opero Frobenius, and you learn that the first eigenvalue, the highest eigenvalue, must be a simple eigenvalue. But in the Dirac case, again, you have a matrix. It is not positive matrix, and so we don't know. And again, we check that it's always the case. We could not find a counterexample. So that's the three main open questions, and we are struggling with this open question for several years now. So let me show you something else which works. This will be the end of the talk. I want to talk about the extension to the solar case. So the solar case, we want to do the same problem, but instead of Dirac minus V, we'll take Dirac minus V beta. Let me remind that beta is one of the Dirac matrix. It's the one in front of the mass. So here, what I'm doing is that optimizing the mass. I want V to be a perturbation of the mass. It has apparently better symmetry properties, so some people say it's better physically speaking. So the spectrum of this operator turns out to be symmetric with respect to 0. So now you have eigenvalues emerging from the bottom and lower essential spectrum at the same time. It is symmetric. So now I don't want the lowest eigenvalue in the gap. What I want to compute is the lowest positive eigenvalue. So this one here. And I ask the same Kähler problem. I want to optimize this first eigenvalue in the gap for all V in LP with the LP norm fixed to alpha. So let me show you some things which does not work to understand why it works afterwards. So you can try to do the same trick and to use Biermann-Schwinger principle and say, okay, lambda is in the spectrum if and only if 1 is the spectrum of this operator, but now V beta has no square roots. V is positive, but beta is a matrix with 1 and minus 1 as eigenvalues. So there is no Hermitian square root. So you can put beta on one side, but not on the other one. And this operator, the Biermann-Schwinger operator, is no longer self-adjoint. In particular, the spectrum can be some points in the complex plane now. So this is true. It's just that now you don't have monotonicity of this operator as a function of lambda. So it's very difficult to track when one will be an eigenvalue of this operator. You cannot just increase or decrease lambda. What you can do is a modified Biermensch-Finger. I write the eigenvalues. I write that one is an eigenvalue of this operator. I multiply this equation by beta. Beta square equal 1. So here you have no longer beta. Here I have beta. So I learn that this is equivalent to this guy. Let me call this operator AV of lambda. And AV is now a good property, has good properties. So lambda is an eigenvalue of the original Dirac operator if and only if 0 is an eigenvalue of this AV of lambda operator. AV is no longer compact, not so nice. It's a compact perturbation of the beta matrix. So you have eigenvalues 1 and -1, and now you do a compact perturbation of this. But it is now increasing in lambda for the same reason as last time. We differentiate the resolvent, it's positive, so it is the operator increasing. So this is the picture you have. Again, I think I took the Gaussian function. This is lambda. For each lambda, you compute the spectrum of AV. You see accumulation, so essential spectrum in -1 and 1. And you have increasing branches of eigenvalue. And each time you touch 0, you have a spectrum. So here for this V, you see there is only 4 eigenvalues, 2 negative ones and 2 positive ones. And again, I can well-define the first positive eigenvalue. We could not make use of this picture. I think it's a nice picture, but it didn't work. I wanted to show you in case someone here in the audience have an idea how to use this picture. So instead, what we do is use the fact that the first eigenvalue, if you square it, it becomes the first eigenvalue of the square operator. So lambda 1 square is the infimum of the operator square. And now I'm back to the inf problem, because now I have this operator. I will optimize in V and optimize in the eigenvector of this operator. And I can write, using the same tricks, the theorem. So it's in preparation. We have a full proof in dimension 2, and we think it's true in dimension 3 as well. For all mass, all p less than bigger than d bigger than 1, the minimization problem is well posed. It is strictly positive, so it means 0 can never be an eigenvalue of this Dirac operator, so there is no 0 mode if V is in LP function. And the corresponding Eigenstein satisfy a nonlinear Dirac solar equation. Dirac psi equal, so we learn that V is psi beta psi, a scalar product in Cn to some power, psi equal lambda psi. So the existence of this equation has been proved in several works, but our approach is to have a variational proof for the existence of solution like this. And with this, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for a very clear talk. Are there any questions or remarks? Then please just unmute yourself and ask.
So yeah, let me ask a simple-minded question. So your problem was not a minimization problem or anything, but after these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, we saw this soup problem. So it looks like a miracle, and I couldn't follow where did this miracle came from.
Yes, so the story of the article is we had a full article working with the min-max principle of Esteban and Serre. And during holidays, I noticed that we could simplify one part of the arguments, and then we could simplify another part. And it was, I didn't sleep very well these holidays because we discovered the 5 tricks in some sense. So yeah, for me, it feels like a bit magical. Everything is here. And so we had to rewrite entirely the article.
Okay, so miracle is
the first trick.
Yeah,
the first trick was to reformulate. That was the hardest part.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it makes a complete sense.
Oh,
We are not used to this formulation, but
okay.
I think if you're making drum, this
Mm.
is the best formulation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
If I understood correctly, none of these tricks are used in the traditional proof for the Schrödinger operator. So this is really just a generalization of that proof.
Hello, Jan, how are you? Yeah, you can do exactly the same for Schrödinger. Oop, where is it? Extra remarks. Yeah, it gives an alternative proof in the Schrödinger case. I think I could not find a reference in the Schrödinger case using Biermenschwinger and noticing that it's just an optimization of a convolution problem. I can do, for the Schrödinger case, K has very nice properties. So I mentioned I can use rearrangement to prove that the optimal V is radial. You can also do moving planes or symmetric planes. You have an alternative proof again that it works. So you can do a lot of tricks in the Biermenschwinger world. And again, you don't have to worry about smoothness. So let me, for example, here you take WLQ function. What I can do is cut it and take the left part and copy on the right part. And I don't have to care about if it's smooth at the boundary because it's an LQ function. So it's a different moving plane technique where you don't care about smoothness, but it works. I'm mentioning moving plane because it was a good, we thought it could work also in the Dirac case. This is one of the technique which has a vector valued interpart. Radial, this is this conjecture here. We cannot do radial rearrangement for matrices, but to cut a function vector valued and to copy it on the other part, this has a counterpart in the spinor case. So we thought it could be something, but it fails.
Any other questions? So I was wondering, what is this Dirac-Soler operator? So what does it physically describe? Does it have some physical interpretation, or it's just a mathematical challenge?
So this is not my specialty, so you should check with ChatGPT. Okay.
Actually,
But,
that's what I
one
did.
thing, thank
Okay.
you. You have the Dirac operator should satisfy some symmetry property based on quantum field theory. So now you want to have a reduced model. The quantum field theory is too difficult, so you want scalar theory or vector valued theory. But now you have to choose, make some choice where to put V and what type of symmetry V must have. So in general, for example, you should add a magnetic field and a vector field, electric field. Here I just have an electric field in some sense.
Okay.
So you have several
Okay.
reduced theory, and one of them is a solar one, which is one of the simplest one. But at
I
least
see. So
it has this particle hole symmetry, that the spectrum is symmetric with respect to the origin.
I see. So it is, in a sense, better than the non-solar operator, like better
I think so,
approximation
yeah.
to QFT or different approximation to QFT.
I know there are other approximations. There is a Gross-Neveu approximation and there is a Tiering approximation. And again,
Oh,
each time, if I understand correctly, is what symmetry you put on V.
I see. Okay, thanks.
So we're talking about physics. So can I ask the physical meaning of this special eigenvalue? So I think below -m you have Dirac-C. And so this eigenvalue you're looking at corresponds to some physical, the lowest physical bounded state or whatever, something like that.
Yeah, this is so. Let me. My understanding is on this operator. For Solar, I think it will be the same.
Mm.
So exactly, you will interpret the eigenvector associated to this eigenvalue as the ground state of your system.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So let me mention that if you fix V, the potential, and you do the C goes to infinity, so the speed of light goes to infinity, then the gap will open.
Mm.
But let me do the opening of the gap, but I will also shift the gap so that the bottom of the essential spectrum is always 0. So first I shift this operator so that m is at 0, and then I go m goes to infinity. Then at the limit, you should recover Schrödinger operator with the same potential.
Okay.
So this eigenvalue in the limit c goes to infinity is, in some sense, the correct Schrödinger operator.
Okay.
I think it's also true for Solar, and actually I should mention that one of these articles, Boussaïd, proves the existence of this equation starting from the Schrödinger case. So we know Schrödinger as a solution, and we do a perturbation. So 1 over c is epsilon, and this is my perturbation.
Thank you.
Ah, you're welcome.
Okay, any other questions or remarks? If not, then let's thank the speaker again
Thank you very much.
and maybe stop the recording and the official part of the meeting.